So we're trying to make up some time, so we decided that we're just going to not allow Jason Cohen or Mike Davies to speak, and then we'll just really jet through this session.
Starting early, huh, Jason?
So, Carlos, what?
My name is Jason Dachman. I'm chief editor at Sports Video Group. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Like I said, we really want to kind of jet through this panel, but also get some good time with these guys. So I'm going to jump right into it. This session, for anybody that's kind of come to the SVG Summit in the past, is a chance to look back, a chance to look forward. What's the coolest shit out there right now? That's really what this session is about. So let's start with Craig, since you're closest to me proximity-wise. You guys did a hell of a show with HDR at Notre Dame this year throughout the season. A big step forward for you guys. Maybe tell us a little bit about it, and then I believe you have a very sexy sizzle reel to play as well.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we were fortunate to do 7 games on big NBC, produced fully in HDR 1080p, 10-bit HDR. The thing that we wanted to solve for was single stream. Certainly HDR is nothing new. We've been trying to crack the code for about 6 years now. A lot of success has been done with the side-by-side model. We felt that that wasn't efficient from a cost perspective long-term, so we dove into trying to do it in a single stream, which created a lot of puzzles and challenges, which we think we solved most of. The big takeaway for us, we realized that for HDR to really catch on within the industry, you know, for NBC to be able to share clips with CBS and Turner and Fox, a lot of work needs to be done on the vendor side in order to systemize the metadata that is created in the HDR stream. So if I were to give footage to Chris, he would need to know whether it was HLG or PQ or what the negative gain is from the video guy. We need some way in order to turn it back into SDR. So anyway, that was, there were other takeaways. We need more efficient codecs. We need less noise in cameras. So again, HDR was nothing new, but for us, it was a good opportunity to really to solve the single stream and then really focus on what the next steps are from an industry perspective.
Cool. And as they say in showbiz, why don't we roll the clip, yeah?
This will not be in HDR.
We weren't going to foot the bill for that.
Every player on every Notre Dame team does before stepping onto the field. They walk past this sign, add a personal touch, connecting them to years of history, generations of greatness.
Go, 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 go!
And a simple idea that encompasses everything this program professes to be about.
We're the best football team in the United States.
Sure, it's just a sign, but it's also one last reminder of what they're here to do. 10 games in. Did he catch it? Yes! Touchdown Irish! The Fighting Irish have passed every test. And he's sacked by Jerry Tillery. They put themselves in position for the chance to get to the summit of college football. Book throws, end zone touchdown! Now they've come east from South Bend to play guest host at another shrine of sports. To face off against a dangerous threat to their perfect season. Ravion Pierce, touchdown, wins it for the Orioles. And one from New York at that. But today, at Yankee Stadium, the last thing the Irish will do is reconnect with their trademark touchstone. Just one last reminder of what they're here to do. One more connection to the history they're chasing.
I'll also say that we also did those 7 games with Atmos, a 5.1.4, which was also...
No small feat.
Yeah, no small feat in that as well. So
and that experience, honestly, that was the more overwhelming. I mean, that being inside that stadium with Atmos, the one time I experienced it was just tremendous.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Cool. Chris from Turner, familiar face up here. Tell us a little bit about some of the cool things that you've done over the last 6 months.
So I think one of the things that we really did was experimenting with video over IP, starting with the Ryder Cup. It allowed us to do a few things. It allowed us to play a little bit with with our social deliveries. We were able to break a little bit of ground there, doing some live video production for social, but then also for our PGA.com product, where we were able to really sort of push the limits of what they could cover with our primary production facility being at our studios in Atlanta. And so that was, we worked with the folks at AviWest on the encoding. We worked with our service provider Level 3, or CenturyLink, for the IP space. And we turned out what I thought it ended up being a really, really good production. A lot of our production folks were very happy that we were able to deliver as best as we could. We also had a couple of cameras that were dedicated to that particular production. I think all in, between that, being able to utilize our own studio facility, I think we enhanced with using a golf simulator, because one of the things that we like to do on PGA.com is we also like to instruct. And when we're local or domestic, we're able to actually have a golfer go out to the putting green and do some demonstrations out of our remote studios. But in this case, we were able to keep all of that and still have a production that was very much on par with actually being on site.
And leveraging largely the public internet. I mean,
correct, right. And in fact, that was probably the bigger one. And obviously, you have to be very calculated when you make a decision to do something over public internet. But this seemed like one that we could work through, and it was something that had been tested a few years back in Scotland. Not much press about it, but so we'd seen the concept work, and so that was pretty exciting.
What do you have to show us here?
Well, actually, a couple things. The other, not to go through the HDR, I think Craig did a great job talking about a lot of the challenges we all faced. We also had an opportunity to learn from that too. But what we're going to look at is just a couple of video clips of our first tee experience for social that we did from France, as well as a couple of clips from the actual show itself. And then finishing, one thing that we learned when we did the Tiger Phil golf event in Las Vegas is we really learned how compelling content can be, and the notion that everybody was going to kind of get to step inside.
Why are you smiling, Jason? I see you over there.
We all wanted to make a joke when the match came up, but none of us are going to because we're all polite, and everything went perfectly. There was nothing that went wrong.
It did. 100%.
Would you like me to go now and just get at it?
Go ahead.
Roll your flag.
Well, let's take a look.
Let's take a look at it.
Let's take a look.
So this was the first tee experience. And so one of the things about the first tee that we were trying to bring was kind of the excitement, at the Ryder Cup every time they tee off by providing the first tee coverage. And so, we carried it as long as we could, and then now we're moving into more of the PGA.com coverage. And again, what you're looking at is still 100% produced in Atlanta. Again, all the streams over the internet. And so
the team needs another victory.
Commentary from Atlanta. And in this case, there were 16 feeds. And we worked with CTV. At the end of the day, I think we ended up with what turned out to be a fairly compelling, even though the United States didn't win, it turned out to be a fairly compelling product on the end.
Yeah, if only you could have manipulated Tiger's performance when you carried it over IP or something along those lines.
That would have been helpful, but I think he saved it for the match.
But it hits the brakes. Fairway. It is pandemonium in Paris.
And so this is the studio component. So we were able to bring it back into the studio multiple times to provide a little more in-depth analysis.
You want them right back out there.
And then you had a chance to see the simulator in the corner, which we used a few times.
So probably the first and last nice thing I'm going to say is thank you for all you've done for the game, for this opportunity.
It's definitely going to be the last thing.
That's probably the last nice thing I say. So.
From right here.
It almost feels like it wants to go a hair to the right the first half.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
It's almost right down Broadway, isn't it?
I got no problem with that.
Okay.
All right, so let's look at this here because that flew quite a bit shorter than it should have. So we had hurt. So we're at least back to San Diego numbers, and I think a little bit under because of the cool. It's gotten a little bit chillier.
Well, it's slow, but going up against that valley there.
Right.
Where's this?
I'm in the neighborhood of maybe a cup, maybe just more than a cup.
I don't think it's more than that cup.
Not more.
Not more than a cup,
Just
no.
over the cup, maybe just under it then.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, knock it in. What do you got?
Yeah, I don't want to win like this. Come on, let's go. You're going to knock that anyway. Let's go.
That was cool.
That's good.
So, and I think, again, sort of what not that there was necessarily anything in the world of technology that we broke using wireless microphones, but I think what, sort of what was sort of proofed out through this is that the content itself was truly compelling in terms of everybody wanting to really step inside the mind of a Tiger Woods. What is he thinking about when he's looking at a putt? What is he actually seeing, especially if you're a golfer, which I am not. But if you are, to actually hear those thoughts, to hear those conversations, I think was really exciting. And I think that it proved to some extent that if you make that available, people are really, really interested in consuming that.
Yeah, it was very cool. And I mean, we were going to charge all you guys for that clip, but we decided to just give it for free. Jason,
Didn't help yourself,
repeat-
right?
Didn't
help yourself.
I expect that, Jason.
I'm
I
sorry,
expect that from Mike. I always expect
It's
it
just
from
low-hanging fruit.
Jason.
Okay.
Okay.
Jason Cohen, obviously, I think you've probably spoken at every single SVG Summit, but this is your first as a member of the CBS team, correct?
It is, yeah. Good morning, everybody. You said we're short on time, right?
Yep, but go for it.
Well, in third grade, when I started thinking about my television career, yes, it's my first year at CBS, and Mike and I shared many years at HBO Boxing, and
Nobody cares. Move
he can
along.
attest that I texted him from the golf course like, "Wow, this is much bigger than a boxing ring." No, listen, I had the privilege and honor to kind of just sit on the sidelines to a certain degree and watch Ken Agard and Patty Power and Mike Francis and team put together what we called the SVG Summit remote. Some people might have called it the NAB remote, but not me. We had at PGA Championship, quite frankly, just, a plethora of different technologies, enhancements, toys, vendors and such. And I think, why don't we show the clip first, and then I'll go back and kind of talk about what the thought process is and, where do we go from here. Obviously, that was just a breath of some of the technology. We had, over 115 cameras and, 170-some microphones and a couple of ESs. And, what I think is important, right, and I think what's kind of the, the conduit for some of the even discussions that we'll have in the last 3 minutes of this panel, is what I think is interesting, right, is that you'll see discussions throughout these 2 days on topics such as at-home productions, or at 1:15 in this room, there's a panel on artificial intelligence that you should be at. But at the same token, right, we're trying to do everything we can to enhance the linear broadcast, especially on the big stage, as much as we can, with putting cameras and microphones in places where we just try to keep thinking of that don't even exist anymore, right? And I think there's still, a finite number of places where you can enhance the show, and we're trying to, creatively figure out ways to do things that just hasn't been done, and it's getting more and more challenging. I'm still distracted by the moment.
Got a Hulk behind the curtain here, yeah.
And Davies,
It's all right there, right?
Davies has a yawn
I
machine.
have a feeling that's a Fox employee. But so there's Cheney. But I think that's the task that we're up against, right? Is, what else can we do to enhance the broadcast that gives us a return on the investment, right? And I think what we've always challenged with is that fine line between doing something that's cool and sexy and fun that gets you an SVG article, but also costs a lot of money, versus doing something that actually enhances the show and that the consumers appreciate and tells a story in a way that they don't ordinarily get or they need, right? And so, you know, I think the PGA Championship was a great example, I think, in my humble opinion, of a lot of technologies that serviced both, right? Certainly they were fun to implement, but more importantly, I think they helped the consumer appreciate that tournament in a way that they don't all, you know, ordinarily get with things such as access, right? Whether it's audio and video, analytics, whether it's, you know, a 4D system going around the golfer to show his swing, or Hawkeye and the course and the undulation and that kind of stuff. And so access and analytics are probably my two biggest things. And there's some orangutan in the back asking for Mike to go, so I'll certainly turn it over to Mike.
And it is Brandon wrote this in his article about the PGA. It's a video gamification, right? So you I think, are getting a younger audience, which obviously golf needs right now, by doing a lot of these things and attracting those viewers that, you know, need to be told the story in that fashion.
Right. And look, a lot of the toys and tricks that I think different broadcasters are trying, right? Whether it's Skycam from behind the QB, like the Madden football angle, next-gen stats, biometrics, which, you know, Mike and I have talked about, right? That's all kind of straight into the, you know, the Xbox world.
Yeah, I mean, that's funny though, isn't it? I mean, and I'll sort of channel my inner Australian. I don't care. That's right, you're done. I get to show my golf video next, okay, pal? Sadly, I do have a golf video, and that's like kind of embarrassing. Yeah, it's the gamification, right? Like when video games first became capable of reproducing sort of realistic shots, they looked at TV coverage to emulate. Now we're looking at video game coverage and saying, okay, you know, where can we put these cameras? I mean, obviously, if you're in video games, you know, you don't have to worry about you know, tethering cameras to the physical world. So now you have, you know, companies like Intel and others who are doing, you know, volumetric capture in the form of their TrueView product, you know, which is just scratching the surface, of course, and what volumetric capture is going to mean. And I think that, you know, a lot of times we get up here, you know, we do talk about things that don't quite exist. In fact, I think there's a measurable amount of these panels that are talking about things that aren't quite there yet.
And how about 5G?
All right, thank you for that. Yeah, good segue. And
speaking of things that aren't quite
I'm
there
going to roll
yet,
the
but getting there.
crappiest video of the whole panel here, so go ahead and roll it. It's and no sound here because I literally edited this on my iPhone. It's we did. There's a white paper out right now. We did some 5G. We used 5G to two cameras, 4K HDR cameras that were sent over 5G at the U.S. Open in Shinnecock Hills, and the point was to at least get things started. I mean, it was interesting. You know, a lot of the technology that they have now, you know, fit on the back of a golf cart, and that will be soon miniaturized to something that will, you know, fit in your cell phone. But I don't think you can reasonably overestimate how much of a fundamental change 5G is going to bring to our industry. Now, there's a couple of things. I mean, this is a great thing, right? It's got certainly some enterprise uses. I mean, we tried to prove here that at least for a TV production, and again, a golf production, that you could eliminate costly RF cameras and fiber by utilizing 5G, but also there's a huge consumer upside to what 5G is going to bring. And in fact, I would say that, you know, the killer app for 5G hasn't even been thought of yet. And that's kind of why I think it's exciting. The other thing that we did, and shit, it's another golf thing.
I can't wait for Carlos to have a golf video.
I know.
Got a golf video coming up.
but no, it's interesting that it all happens around golf because it's, you know, these are good test beds for these types of things. And we did 9 bonded cellular cameras to do the U.S. Mid-Am in Charlotte. And just to prove that it could be done without wireless, you know, regular microwave cameras and fiber, we did it with CP, and they utilized a company called Mobile Viewpoint that, again, is something that's going to be ported into 5G. So I'm sure you could kind of you know, gauge the excitement from my video of how amazing that was in 5G. But that's what I think we're excited about, and it's been a hell of a year. And I would also the hell are you even talking about over there? Is like Chris was saying, I think that, you know, video over IP is kind of been the transformative thing over the last couple of years, where you're actually getting a better product for a smaller price, and it's been something we've been using a lot too.
I think it's one of the fascinating things at this session that we sort of do. We call it something different every year, but it's very similar. The innovations come at the top and the bottom, for lack of a better term, right? The cost efficiency shows and those A-game shows. And you're seeing huge leaps forward with 5G at the top, bonded cellular for more cost-efficient type shows. It's pretty interesting to see both sides of the spectrum kind of jumping forward. Carlos, I want to get you in here 31 minutes into the session. So what do you
10 seconds left?
Yeah, what do you have to talk about today?
Oh, so, well, obviously we continue to churn out the at-home productions. Those have been very fruitful and rewarding for us. I mean, we've been starting that since 2014 from a design perspective, online, weekly since 2015. We're actually doing probably a couple of those a week now. We'll continue with those, and I obviously see that growing even further.
Yeah, I mean, you guys pioneered. Before there was all these different terms for at home, you guys were well ahead of the curve on a lot of that stuff.
I think we have 5 different terms for those type of productions. And
at home, multicam, micers, Remy, remote if you're European, they got lucky.
We like home run production.
There you go, home run.
I mean, who doesn't like a home run, right?
Jesus Christ, you make our lives hard if we're writing about it.
Yeah.
I mean, and obviously you're looking at the savings and the technology, but also, you know, there's an aspect of this where you think of just, you know, you're at home, like there's no place like home. You think of that expression. So you go home, you've been on vacation, or you've been working out of town. You get home, you sit on your couch, your remote control, it's exactly the way it is. You know how it works. You know how your TV works, you know how your phone works, your lights in your house, whatever. So think of coming into a control room, you know, the entire staff of a control room working out of the same control room they work out on a daily basis. And that, you know, is something that we didn't even think about. You know, that wasn't even thinking of what the ask of the requirements were. But that has been really huge.
And you get more shows out of your top director, your top producer, your top graphics
Exactly. So you got the A-team aspect as well. So, you know, you got your top EVS operators, graphics, your best producers, and why send them out on a remote to do, you know, one game when they can do, you know, 3, 4 in one day, even if it's just 2. But they can do the next day. You have another game on the next day. So, you know, it's just from every angle you can think of, you know, it's really neat.
It's definitely the biggest transformation, I think, in the industry over the last 5 years, the growth of at-home. And that's obviously, on an operational sense, a huge deal. But on the sexier side, you guys are also doing some really cool stuff in studio with AR, some of the transport mechanisms and that type of thing, right?
Right, we're doing some teleportation, you know, we're dabbling, well, actually we're doing a lot of AR as well, VR, slow, you know, another one we've been playing a lot with now is slow-mo POVs, for example. That's, you know, it's not just an angle on a POV anymore. You can get a lot more out of it. You can use them, put them inside the net on a goal, and have them be a slow-mo replay as well.
Right. So what are we going to see in your clip here?
Well, this is like a bit of a sizzle of, I think, about just about everything. So,
play it out.
Roll.
Campeón en el 2001 con el equipo de Santos.
Un compromiso que tenemos.
Muy feliz, muy agradecido con todos ustedes, con toda la gente de...
No lo mate, cuidado con...
Eso fue lo que dijo en su última conferencia de prensa, por supuesto, pues
de lo que van a presentar sobre el terreno de juego. Háblame primero de los alemanes, Paco Villa.
Fíjate, primera modificación importante, en lugar de la línea de 4 con la que jugó el partido anterior.
El sueco, lo que puede encontrar, el japonés, Yuya Kubo, que también es de los...
Alcanza a desviar o no, Martí y Perisic deja la mano abierta, si entra el VAR.
¿Por qué no en la otra?
Y en la otra no.
Bien, es que junto a Rakitic y Modric han encerrado muy bien la posición de Kanté. No lo dejan salir jugando, le ha costado mucho a eso.
His video is better than yours.
Way better. Way better.
I did that on my iPhone as well, so.
I think you've been had, Mike.
We'll share after. Let's take this offline.
So we saw a lot of virtual, a lot of AR in there, so I'll throw it out to you guys, and we don't have a whole lot of time, but we'll hit as many topics as we can. Are we past the point where AR is just eye candy on remotes and starting to use it a little bit more in terms of storytelling feature, in terms of integrating actual information a little bit more, that type of thing? Whoever wants to take that one.
Well, I'll just throw it out. I mean, for the game, yeah, I mean, I think, it's a great way to, get information across and not leave the action, not put out a full screen graphic. But I think one of the cool ways that I saw in Carlos's video as well, and I saw a bunch of this stuff at the World Cup, is how it was being used, in the studio for set extensions and things like that. I mean, especially with the World Cup, where you've got such a tiny physical space to be able to expand it and use it for the types of things that typically LEDs would be used for in the past, and those types of things have been pretty cool. I mean, we've got a studio in Charlotte. We'll be working on that. That's how NASCAR, the shoulder program from NASCAR, will come out of, and it gives you more hooks and handles to kind of put that information in.
Right, and the gaming engines are driving a lot of this in terms
Sure.
of developing, yeah.
Well, I also think that as biometrics, we're really scratching the surface on what kind of information we can pull out of that. And so to the extent that you're able to apply some of that to these virtualized graphics, I think there are stories that we haven't even thought of that are probably hiding in a lot of these.
Who's looking at biometrics right now? Is anybody, I know obviously we have player approval issues and Players Association stuff, but who's actually saying, okay, we want to try to get this out there and incorporate it into the show?
I want to see Jason answer this.
So Carlos, when you have the soccer game, I mean, look, I think it's even when I was at HBO, right, we were trying to measure the force of a fighter's punch, and we were looking at the speed of his arms, and I think those types of metrics, speed, force, when you can get things, biometrics like heart rate, pulse, energy, dehydration. I think in the next 12 to 24 months, those things are going to start to become more prevalent because, again, I think it's just the next generation of storytelling and access. And, again, there's only so many places to put cameras and microphones. And the next evolution, in my opinion, is sensors. And I think it's going to happen.
I mean, we're seeing it. We had an esports session already this morning. We're seeing it in terms of eye movement for esports. We're seeing heart rate. We're seeing all those kind of things. I think it's probably just a matter of time, right, before you get to stick and ball sports.
Yeah, I think it's also, I mean, you've got to, at that point, I mean, you have to describe what you're talking about to your audience, right? Like, what does pulse really mean? What does force really mean in terms of, a metric that means something like, speed in a car or, swing speed? And I think that, the audience is ready for those higher level metrics, but it's going to take a little time to get people used to that, right?
Yeah, we saw it with StatCast. We're seeing it with next-gen stats. I mean, it just, like you said, it takes time and the audience learns and becomes a little more sophisticated, right? I want to get to, we've seen, you guys say that there's only so many places you can put cameras, and yet
I don't know if that's
keep
true.
finding new ways. That's what I'm saying. So, I mean, this year we saw ref cams exploded. Pylon cams is standard now on so many games. We see the first down marker cams, corner cams on soccer that you guys did on MLS Cup and others have done. I mean, what are some of the cool spots in terms of these POV cameras, and what are the ones that you're most excited about? I'll throw it out to anybody on that one.
Craig, you look like you're ready to.
I will say that I'm not a huge fan of a lot of POV cameras. As far as wearable cameras go, I think there's still too much latency. It sort of makes me personally feel a little bit wheezy.
Action Streamer is getting ready to talk to Craig.
I disagree. I think that, putting cameras on participants, be they refs or umpires or something else, I mean, the technology has gotten to that point where it's no longer, okay, here comes the camera and the umbilical and the belt pack or anything, and not as a live camera, but as a replay. I mean, some of the replays, if you use those types of cameras, not as a gimmick, but as an actual replay angle. And I was surprised to find out that, yes, the umpire in college football, because he's in such a great spot, he's behind the defense, the plays coming at him, as good as that is, the linesman is actually an amazing spot, because that's where you're seeing the ins and outs. You're seeing people miss or catch the ball. And if you use these angles, if you can restrain yourself enough to use these angles only when it makes sense as an actual camera angle instead of just a gimmick, I think that they can add to the show a lot.
Right, and I think also if you take, like we've been saying, is also you take that into slow-mo as well. And we've seen POVs that have actually changed plays. So there have been calls where the go back to the replay and none of the cameras got to see a single thing except for one POV.
Right.
And so if you get a little bit better quality out of those and you get a slow-mo so that you can get a replay that's useful, I mean, yeah, I may agree that you get a little dizzy with a lot of movement on POVs, but to use them strategically for replays, I think they're fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it's great if you're in the right place at the right time. There's no question.
That first down marker game on college football, I can think of at least 10 times where I saw, did he get the first or didn't he? That really, it's a decisive angle. It's very cool. Yeah. Wanted to hit on one or two more things before we run out here. Just an update. Are we heading towards 3, 4, 5 sky cams on a single game? Maybe a baker's dozen at some point. How many sky cams can we have? And are there any updates on that? And that have kind
How many you got for the Super Bowl?
I should probably look into that, shouldn't I? Right, I thought today's panel was sponsored by the PGA, not Skycam. Yeah, I mean, look, Skycam, obviously as a regular low Skycam on premier college football and NFL games is a standard. High Sky is now obviously a standard in the higher level games and the bigger stages. You may see more than that in Atlanta, you may not. But I'll let Ken Agard address that later this afternoon in his panel. But I mean, look, I think that the trick to Skycam, and I know Steven is in the crowd, is not necessarily, if you have one or how many you have, it's how the director uses it. Right, and I think what you're starting to see are directors step out of the box and use Skycams in different capacities, whether they're getting a little bit lower than they have traditionally or they're going over players in a more unconventional manner. And I think when you start to direct the Skycam out of the box, it becomes a much more different element than what has been done.
So one thing we tried, and Skycam's a great partner of all of ours, having run in all of their competition out of town apparently, is that we actually took an empty field in Minnesota one day and just played around with a high school team and kind of saw what it could do. As it turns out, there's some things that you can do, but pretty much we've kind of figured it out a lot of ways in terms of, there's not a ton else that is out there for Skycam. However, I think that we've also challenged those flying camera vendors to come up with different ways of rigging to, let's say go, like we do in basketball, where you've got the rail cams or the sky cams that kind of do again, it's sort of a video game kind of shot where you've got, a sideline point of view, and, maybe that becomes an alternate view, maybe that becomes, something that is only used once in a while. But it was fun to kind of play around with that and sort of reinvent, the camera angles.
Real briefly, Chris, I was just going to say, I mean, it's not just a football field.
Yeah,
we saw NBA Summer League,
correct.
Almost in the front here. Pretty cool angle on basketball.
And thanks to the work of Steve and a lot of his team, we are, as well as our partners at ESPN, we've been doing a lot of playing around with Skycam for the NBA. Obviously, we have several more challenges, especially as the arenas that they're building now, the scoreboards are getting larger, making the fly space a lot more difficult. Then there's one of the things that we've talked about on some earlier panels. There's the in-arena experience versus the at-home experience, meaning can we move the scoreboard higher, and how does that affect the in-arena experience to allow the Skycam to fly or to get underneath it? There's all sorts of other gaming issues that we're trying to sort through, but thankfully everybody's committed to that because I think the view that Skycam provides, the angles that it provides, to your point, Jason, in terms of how it's directed, I think can provide a very compelling angle for in-arena and for basketball coverage. So we continue to explore it. We're continuing to work with the NBA on it. We're continuing to work with ESPN and all experimenting. Hopefully we'll get there very soon.
Cool. We got to about 1/5 of the things that we wanted to talk about, which is pretty standard for this panel. So that's good. We have 20 seconds left. So now is where I see if you guys actually read your prep sheets, because I did warn you that this question was coming. One technology you are most excited about right now. It can be a capture technology. It can be an IP transport technology. It can be audio, whatever you want. Craig, you're on the line.
I'd say right now it's a combination really of everything that we've discussed. I mean, nothing in this industry happens in a vacuum, obviously, so we are aware of what the others are doing. I don't think at-home is going away anytime soon. I think 5G is going to certainly change that model. We're looking more and more to do at-home. Well, I'll just leave it at that with 5G.
Cool. More of a lightning round style here. Chris, go ahead.
I'm Craig. One. He said one, Craig.
Sorry. We got to get to our tea time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that the 1080p HDR. You know, we had a chance to play in the space and learning a lot of the lessons that Mike and his team, CBS, Craig. I mean, having an opportunity to look at to a lot of those teams and what they've done. It's definitely a new space. It's definitely exciting. Again, it's almost like to some degree reinventing how we put the remote together. So
awesome, Jason.
Skycam.
Cool. More and more Skycam.
No, listen, I'm fascinated with the biometrics. That's why Mike punted it to me. He knew that I'm interested in that stuff, and I'll be curious to see how that plays out and see where that goes.
Yeah, Mike?
2019 is the year that 3D comes back, everybody. Name it, all right? You know, gone but not forgotten, so keep a lookout.
We'll have James Cameron here next year again, just to redo that. Go for it.
I think, artificial intelligence or machine learning is, I mean, I don't mean just for subclipping or stuff like that, but there's uses out there that, we've seen for tracking action on the field, tracking auto, controlling microphones, cameras, and stuff like that. So, I mean, that's something that I'm really excited about and that we're looking.
Thanks, Carlos. Perfect plug for Jason's panel today at 1:15, I think.
1:15.
Which will be all about that stuff. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming out.